Around the various sports leagues, there have been a lot of massive trades that have been being pulled off, and now it seems like the NFL is getting set for some of its own. And could the Detroit Lions be at the center of all this? We're going to talk about it, so stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. It doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. Folks, I know that for this episode, this is going to be one that is both very straightforward and yet at the same time not straightforward. And I know that sounds rather oxymoronic, but it's the truth. What am I referring to here? What I'm referring to is, as we already know, going into this offseason, the focus is defense, defense, defense. How do we get the defense better, much more depth, much more talent, so that way, for the 2025 season, we're ready to lock, rock, and roll to go for a Super Bowl. That is the overall vague, kind of definition of a message that everybody's looking at. But once you start whittling away all the extra fluff and, guff and everything else, and you start getting down to the nitty-gritty, primarily what most people are thinking and looking for is, how do we get more edge rushing talent? How do we get more pass rushing, power? How do we get more of a lethality off of the edge? Well, as I've talked about already in one episode, there are three primary ways that the Lions can do this: the free agency market, the draft, and the trade market. Now, I've already made it abundantly clear that I think the Lions' best route and most likely route is going to be through the draft. However, though, news has just broken that I guarantee you this has probably got Lions fans whipped up into a shark feeding frenzy, because reports are now coming out that Myles Garrett, the superstar edge rusher from the Cleveland Browns, the same team that we traded for Zadarius Smith from, he is stating that he wants out. He wants to be traded from the Cleveland Browns. He's done. He no longer wants to play with the team. Okay, well, let's just understand that announcement for what it is. That's a no-brainer. That is not a surprise. The Cleveland Browns are a terrible organization. They have made an absolute litany of terrible decisions over the last couple of years. Primarily anything to do with the Deshaun Watson issue has been a disaster. So it's like, okay, that organization is in full-blown rebuild mode, because you're tied to a quarterback that has absolutely shown nothing to indicate that he's a franchise-level quarterback anymore. You are drowning in cap debt, and on top of that, you haven't been as successful as you thought you were going to be after you made all of these acquisitions. So now you have one of your superstar players who's like, yeah, I want out. That's not a surprise. However, though, now you have the rebound effect that's now going to come from the rest of the NFL with news that one of the best edge rushers in the NFL wants to hell out. He wants a trade. Well, for the Lions fan base, for the Lions faithful, that might as well have been them hearing that Christmas morning is literally coming sooner than what we expected this year, because it's like, oh my Lord, we now have the chance to potentially get one of the best edge rushers in the NFL and pair him alongside of Aiden Hutchinson. And I know for a lot of Lions fans, this is just absolute manna from heaven. Because to them, they're like, oh my Lord, what a freaking, thing it would be if we could land Myles Garrett. And don't get me wrong, if we could get Myles Garrett, it would be ecstatic. It would. Myles Garrett is considered a top 5 edge rusher. The guy is a disruptive force. He is a literal wrecking machine. And do not for one singular second think that I would not love to have him on the Detroit Lions team wearing the Honolulu blue and silver. However, though, I'm just going to put it out there for what I think it truly is. I don't think it's going to happen. I would love it to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. Here's the reason why. Again, we have to understand how this Lions front office has done business. Making big-time profile trades is not something they've done. Again, you have to understand something. The biggest trade that Brad Holmes has ever pulled off was the very first one he ever pulled off, the Goff-Stafford trade. Ever since then, the Lions have at best probably made B-level trades, maybe C-level. Again, the Lions are not a team that has gone into the business of, how do we make these massive swing for the fences type of trades so that way we can be in the news cycles. Because the Lions aren't about that. They're looking for guys that either, one, fit their scheme and fit their culture, or two, fit a need that is absolutely critical at a certain moment. Typically, they're looking for one that fits both. But here's what I got to say. Number one, I don't know if the Lions would want to even, how do I put this? Potentially even want to, think about this. And I'll tell you why. I said it before. I'll say it again now. And I will say it again in the future. Edge rushers like Myles Garrett, they are not freaking cheap. They cost a damn a lot amount of resources. Let's just call it for what it is, folks. Even if the Lions were seriously interested, and I'm not saying they aren't, they might very well be. And I would say this, they would be foolish not to at least have some interest. But let's just call it for what it is. To trade for a Myles Garrett, who is in his late 20s, about to hit his early 30s, this is a guy that shows that he is one of the best, still has plenty of, gas left in the tank, has the ability to be a disruptive force, has 2 years left on his contract. This is a guy that to whoever trades for him, depending upon what they have on their team already, could instantaneously, overnight, make them a Super Bowl contender. Or a team like the Lions, even though the Super Bowl has not yet even been played in New Orleans between the Eagles and the Chiefs, make them the Super Bowl favorites going into next year. A trade like this would do that. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But a trade like that would also cripple the Detroit Lions. Because, I hate saying this, but it's the truth. If you're going to make a trade for a guy like Myles Garrett, there are two main problems that the Lions are going to have to try and figure out how to work their way around. The first one is, how in the hell are you going to pull off the draft compensation to make this work? Because again, like I just said, edge rushers are not cheap. And if you're going to pull off a trade, like I've said before, that's a double whammy. Because think about it. Number one, if you're going to make a trade with the freaking Cleveland Browns for Myles Garrett, that is if they're even willing to, work on a trade. Because as we've known in the past, just because a player wants the hell out doesn't mean that the team's going to be willing to listen to offers. We've heard this whole dime and dance before. Oh, I want out. I don't want to play for this team. And the team's like, we don't care. We're not trading you. They will just sit. We've seen it happen before. And you know what? That might very well be the same thing we're going to have to see with the whole Myles Garrett situation, because Myles Garrett probably played the worst time to try and say, I want out. It's literally the beginning of the offseason. You don't have really much bargaining leverage right now because, that's right, football operations aren't going to start for, another 7 months or so. So it's not like you saying you're not going to do anything is really going to incentivize the freaking Browns to, get this whole thing started sooner rather than later. If they're interested in you playing for them, they hold all the leverage right now. But let's just say the Browns are willing to trade him. In order to trade a player like Myles Garrett, the Lions are going to have to give up at least 2 first-round draft picks. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's going to have to happen. And I'm sorry to say it, but after the way Brad Holmes has damn near hit on every single first-round draft talent that we've drafted, I don't think that's a smart idea. Think about it. Take a look at every first-round draft talent that Brad Holmes has acquired. Penei Sewell, Aiden Hutchinson, Jamison Williams. Then you go to this most recent draft with Terrion Arnold. And I'm trying to remember who was in 2023. Oh, that's right. You had Jahmyr Gibbs and you had Jack Campbell. Other than Terrion Arnold being his first year with the Detroit Lions, every single one of those guys has shown that they are integral parts of this team, some way more so than others. Do you honestly want to take away 2 more potential first-round draft hits like that from Brad Holmes for a Myles Garrett? Granted, I'm not saying that is a bad thing about Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is a great damn player. But here's the drawback. Here's the offset of the price for something like that. Why would you give up 2 first-round draft talents for a Myles Garrett who is, at this point, most likely towards the beginning of the middle of his career, or maybe towards the end of his career? It depends on how long he plays. When if you go with how Brad Holmes has been drafting in the first round, you've got a guy that you're going to have for the next 14, 15, 16 years potentially. Try and make that cost effectiveness make sense. Try and make that offset make sense. But then, not only is the draft compensation problem something you're going to have to try and work around, then there is the cap problem you're going to have to work around. Yes, the Lions have a lot of cap right now. They're dealing with $46-something million worth of cap space. And that's before the actual cap figure has been released for this year. Because everyone's thinking it's going to jump up like another $15-20 million. It could jump up even more because last year it was supposed to jump up only like $15-20 million and it jumped up $30 million. So the Lions could get even more cap space. I don't know. But I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket on the potential of it might happen. I want to deal with what I know for certain. So let's think about it. You bring in a guy like Myles Garrett, you have to trade at least 2 potential first-round draft picks, no questions asked. So you're losing out on 2 potential first-round rookie talents that are like a Jahmyr Gibbs, like an Aiden Hutchinson, like a Penei Sewell, like a Jamison Williams, Jack Campbell, whatever, for a Myles Garrett. But then on top of that, you have to pay out that salary cap fee. Well, here's my issue with that part that you have to try and work around. That $40 million that you've now all of a sudden accrued onto your cap books is going to be money that you're now going to be taking away from guys that are currently on our roster that need to be dealt with. Guys like, Aiden Hutchinson, like Jamison Williams, like Kirby Joseph. Because here's the thing, just because Myles Garrett still gets paid doesn't mean those guys are going to all of a sudden just say, oh yeah, you know what, I'm going to pull a timeout and I'll wait until you guys get more money so that way we can actually, work on a contract. They're still going to want to get theirs. They've worked their asses off for it. So this whole idea of getting Myles Garrett, don't get me wrong, I love it. It's massive news. And if it were to be pulled off, you want to talk about the trade that happened with the Mavericks and the Lakers the other night? Dude, if the Lions were to pull off a trade for Myles Garrett, it would be something of the same nature. Because then at that point, the Lions have everything they need on defense. They have 2 prolific pass rushers in Garrett and Hutch. You've also got a pretty damn good one in frickin' Zadarius Smith. So now you've got 3 damn fine edge rushers. You've got an improved frickin' secondary that's getting better. You've got a team that when it was fully healthy was absolutely destroying opposing offenses. And, by the way, speaking of our offense, we were just shown in the frickin' Pro Bowl that it has the skill positions and, talent to take over events. A move like that would definitely send the NFL into a tailspin. It'd be like, holy crap. But again, while that news sounds all great, grand, fine, and glorious, it's about how do you handle it once it actually happens inside of your own organization. How do you justify giving up those talented picks? How do you make the cap situation work when you still got to pay and feed guys that have already been here, like JMO, like Hutch, like Kirby, and all of these other guys that have already shown that, hey, they've earned their contracts. They've earned to get a pay extension. Because money, again, even though money's made of paper, it don't just grow on trees like, oh, you know what, we'll just keep throwing it and, somehow, some way we'll make it work. That's not the way cap space works. My whole point is this. Would I love the trade? Oh, you bet your sweet bottom dollar I would. I would be absolutely over the damn moon if we could make that trade happen. But the major problem I have with it is, how do you make it work? Now, obviously, that's questions that Brad Holmes, Mike Disner, Dan Campbell, and all the rest of them would have to figure out if they actually, decided the trade was worth going for. But for me, as a fan, my natural concern is okay, you get Myles Garrett, but how does that have an effect on trying to maintain the structural integrity of the roster that you've worked so hard to build? Because again, you have to take a look at how the Lions have built things. They haven't done it by making all these crazy, high-profile, swing-for-the-fence type trades. They've done it through smart, conservative growth through the draft. And that is how you have long-term success. So again, if the Lions were to make this trade, it'd be absolutely humongous news. But at the same time, I'd be like, okay, this is a complete opposite effect about how the Lions have done things up until this point. And it would start telling me that the Lions are kind of getting into a desperation mode. Because if you make a move like that, you're saying, okay, we don't have as much time as we think we have for our Super Bowl window, which I don't think the Lions think that at all. In fact, I'm almost willing to bet my bottom dollar they don't think that. And for me, it's like, again, if you can continue to make your process work the way it's been working, there's no real reason why you should give up the draft capital and also sacrifice the salary cap needed to pay the stars you've already drafted for. So again, it kind of depends on what side of the spectrum are you on. Do you want the instant gratification and the potential to win a Super Bowl by trading for Myles Garrett? Or, again, do you want to continue to play the long ball game and potentially build something that can win multiple Super Bowls? That's really what this all boils down to. It's still massive news. It's still big potential, earth-shattering news. But you have to put it in the proper perspective of what side of the aisle you're on. And that's where this gets really tricky. And that's also where you're going to find fans that are going to start going back and forth with one another. Because some are going to say, it's not worth it, continue on, trust the process, trust what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have already been doing. And others are going to say, I don't give a damn. I want to win now. We have the roster now. Make the sacrifice. Go all in. Push your chips to the middle. And let's do this. It just depends on where you are in this whole process. For me, I trust what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have already done, and I think it's going to work. I don't feel the need to make a move like that. I'm not saying I would, be negative about it, but to me it's like, listen, if what you've been doing's already been working, there's no reason to change the recipe. Again, what's that saying? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. But again, that's just my opinion. I know not everybody's going to share it. But having said that, I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, want to highly encourage y'all to please make sure you do this. Hit that bell notification icon so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Also want to highly encourage y'all, please make sure you share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Share anywhere and everywhere you possibly can. The more we can share it, the greater the channel can grow and spread. And I do not know why my camera is all of a sudden having a problem, focusing, but thankfully it's here at the end of the actual episode. Having said that, I'm going to end this episode by saying, hey, you know what? If this is the first time watching me, I hope y'all enjoyed the content. I hope y'all, got something out of it, whether this is the first time watching me or you guys have been watching me for a long time. Hope y'all have something also in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.